Right. It looks like we have a quorum and it is 1 o'clock. We are live streaming and recording, so we can begin the review session. Good afternoon and welcome to the New York City Planning Commission review session for Monday, January 31st, 2022. The time is 1 p.m. and a quorum is present. Before we begin our regular agenda, we will have a special presentation by Carol Sammel and Sean Brady with an update on the Jerome Avenue planning study. Carol and Sean.
Thank you, Ryan. Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm very happy to be joined here today by Sean Brady to provide the commission with an update on the Jerome Avenue neighborhood plan implementation. As a reminder, this was a planning process that started back in 2014. The zoning was approved 4 years ago in 2018, 2 years in COVID, but brought $189 million of investment to the Jerome Avenue and surrounding neighborhoods. We did the planning work, would not be possible without having our partner agencies there, sister agencies with us, most notably Housing Preservation and Development, Small Business Services, Parks and Recreation, Department of Health, and the Department of Transportation were the key agencies that we worked with. We're going to be speaking on their behalf today to just provide an update in general on the implementation of the plan. Next slide. As a reminder, and we have, of course, a few new commissioners, the Jerome Avenue planning work focused on the Jerome Avenue corridor where there's the elevated 4 train. It runs about, the study area runs about 2 miles along Jerome Avenue from the Civic Center in the south near Yankee Stadium to just south of Fordham Road in the north. Spans 2 community districts, 2 council districts, bisected by the Cross Bronx Expressway right in the middle, an important feature of the corridor, and home to about 350,000 people. So it's much more than just a neighborhood study, but this is the size of Pittsburgh, as we like to say, or New Orleans. This is a sizable population in the area, and you can see from some of the images, some of the context, whether it's the elevated train or the step streets, addressing Bronx topography and the way that it crosses some of the major corridors like Burnside Avenue. Next slide. And the Jerome Avenue neighborhood plan really provided a blueprint for growth, really in the entire Southwest Bronx, covering a large area. But it paired investments in housing also with investments in neighborhoods and people. Next slide. And the process itself was quite extensive. It was, 3 years, 40 events. That's almost, an event a month, spread out over the geography, whether we were doing a charrette in the Davidson Center or talking to community members on the Grand Concourse out in the summertime, or an open house in the Bronx Museum of the Arts, or in schools having workshops. We were out there. We had special sessions on for the Spanish-speaking community, for the African community, for small businesses, for tenants. And even to this day, we continue to communicate via our e-blast. We have a very large email list that is of people who are interested in learning about the study and following the study, but also the implementation. And we continue to this day to communicate with them, to share with them, find updates about the work that we're doing, but also other really important information that we just need to get out to Bronxites, and that includes, COVID information or whatever it might be that's is necessary to communicate more broadly. So next slide. And out of that robust planning process came plan goals. And while they're focused primarily or initially on new opportunities for affordable housing development, as well as the preservation and investment in existing affordable housing, that's a really important goal. But it also focused on the corridor itself, making sure that it is Jerome Avenue becomes a safe, walkable corridor under the elevated train, that we're diversifying the retail, especially along commercial corridors like Burnside or Tremont Avenue. Then thinking also about the support for the local economy, local workers, specifically the auto workers. And with that comes thinking about improving and working to improve the quality of life and health of the corridor. You'll hear more about what the city's done, the state has done to help address that along the corridor. And then finally, thinking more broadly about community needs, creating new and improving existing parks throughout the districts, as well as building new schools and supporting other community institutions such as the Davidson Community Center, which you'll also hear about. So those are the goals overall. They're overarching, but and work together. Next slide, please. And the plan was really built on these kind of 5 pillars. What I'll note is that the zoning and land use is really in support of the other pillars, whether that's housing or jobs and businesses or building community resources or supporting access and mobility and circulation around the district. Next slide. And as the zoning went through the ULURP process, it's worth noting that it had, full approval, full yeses at every step along the way, whether it was Community Board 4 and 5 or the Bronx Borough President, the City Planning Commission, and then Councilmember Gibson and Councilmember Cabrera also voting yes at the end of the day, and really working, and as we've updated you previously, to implement the plan and continue to do that to this day. Next slide. Just a bit about the zoning. The zoning framework itself really promoted development and density at stations, at the convergence of wide streets, promoting opportunities along other major corridors like the Edward L. Grant Highway, which is that little thumb that sticks out there at the bottom of the image. Supporting the commercial uses at Burnside and Tremont Avenues. We had a dense district there, especially a full commercial district. And promoting all along the corridor was mid-density development and retail continuity along Jerome Avenue. And that was really to help support the other goals. We created special rules for the lots that face the elevated train, specifically allowing for light and air and setback from the train itself. And then finally, we really maintained, and this came out in part during the ULURP process, but also during the planning process, we kept the existing zoning at key locations, most notably at the Cross Bronx Expressway, where it would allow auto uses to remain. Next slide. But as I noted, the zoning was really in support of a lot of other things, including housing. First, a bit about preservation. Since 2014, HPD's financed the preservation of almost 10,000 homes in these areas in community districts 4 and 5. That's quite significant. About 2/3 of the homes in these districts have some kind of rent regulation, and city planning HPD is working closely to preserve those homes going into the future. But since 2018, another almost 4,000 homes have been preserved. So it's really quite an amazing feat in the preservation end of work. Also, in new construction, since the rezoning was approved, HPD's financed the construction of more than 1,000 new affordable homes within the rezoning area. More than half of those are serving low-income households earning less than $53,000 for a family of 3, for example. But there's also a broader commitment to not just the rezoning area, which is this long, skinny area, but to the broader community districts 4 and 5. And HPD's financed over 4,000 new affordable homes in community districts 4 and 5 since the planning process started. More than half of those have been completed since the rezoning was adopted. Next slide. We'll talk a little bit about some of the major initiatives on the city-owned properties. We had, very few city-owned properties, nothing large, and really HPD's worked really closely with the community and with elected officials to make sure we're getting the most out of the city-owned properties. We're going to talk through 4 of those. Next slide. West 169th Street, which is up in Highbridge. The commission saw that last year, got approved in 2021. It's on the same block as the Corporal Fisher Park, which you'll hear about as well. HPD selected the West Side Federation for Senior and Supportive Housing to develop 105 senior units here. and a health center here in Highbridge, redeveloping a vacant lot. Next slide. On Anthony Avenue, so moving west and north near Claremont Park, is a former play lot from ACS, no longer needed, but the site itself is adjacent to an entrance to Claremont Park, so quite an important location, and a child care center. And HPD worked, they had a visioning session, had an RFP process, selected Interborough Community Land Trust in partnership with the development team to redevelop the site for 40 new homeownership opportunities. This would be under the Open Door program, which would provide housing for households making 80 to 110% of the area median income. So the homeownership was a constant issue throughout the planning process, and it's wonderful to see an opportunity like this transformed into new homeownership opportunities in the area. Next slide. And then there were some sites that are throughout the Bronx, but 4 are here in Community Districts 4 and 5, and working with neighborhood infill partners to develop. There are 12 sites, 4 here. 2 in Community District 5 would provide 28 affordable rental homes, and 2 in Community District 4 would provide 4 homeownership opportunities. So both, redeveloping these kind of difficult to develop sites that are scattered throughout, and really providing a drain on the community today could be transformed into much needed rental and homeownership opportunities. Next slide. Next is the Morrisania Diagnostic and Treatment Center facility, which is actually on Girard Avenue. And I would say, but for the planning process, I don't know that we as a city would have stumbled upon this site or targeted this site for redevelopment. But we were really, as we were doing the planning process and understanding the need for city-owned property, really focused on, well, where could we find opportunities for development? And we came upon this parking lot that's a part of an HHC facility. And HHC was absolutely open to thinking about redeveloping it, replace the parking. It will provide 278 units of affordable housing, 100% affordable. 30% of those homes will go to formerly homeless households. And also interesting are 2 other elements. One is that it will include the Bronx Works Empowerment Center, which is a center that will focus on the promotion of housing stability, plus health and wellness in general. And the African Resources Center. This is the largest African population in New York. And this would provide a place for educational opportunities, for service delivery, but also for meeting space, which is needed. So 2 interesting public facilities that will be a part of this development. And then also interesting is that L&M, the chief developer, is expected to exit the ownership structure and offer initial stake to BronxWorks for a nominal fee in year 5. So very soon the ownership could transfer to BronxWorks, a local nonprofit. You can actually see in some of these images, it's a little distorted. I don't think it's that tall and skinny, but you can see how it's responding to the elevated train with the low area and then setting back and rising. Next slide. Here's 1769 Jerome Avenue. This is a private property in Mount Hope. I'm looking out my window at it right now from my office. This is a Bronx Pro development. They're utilizing the R8A zoning to create mixed-use housing, 175 affordable housing units. This was a former shelter. It was an old motel, really. It was a 2-story motel, kind of circular around a courtyard. That is going to be redeveloped or has been redeveloped to provide a full spectrum of housing. So shelter space, but also supportive housing units and permanent housing, plus the supportive services needed for that housing, which weren't there before. So services for the underserved will be the service provider for this. They're using the special rules to address not only the elevated train, but the step street. You can't really quite see it in these images, but there's a step street that runs just to the left of the building there. And also not quite visible, but there's really interesting brickwork that they've done in every element of the building. And the lottery for it launched last November. Next slide. And then the final private site that we'll draw attention to and highlight is on River Avenue, 1184 River Avenue. It's called River Crest. And it's actually 3 buildings, but will be, and used to be parking, primarily also Yankee parking. It's not controlled by the Yankees, but it's private parking that's servicing Yankee games. Being redeveloped into 750 units of affordable housing, supportive housing, commercial and community spaces, just south of 167th Street Station. And they had the groundbreaking for the final phase last November. And also very exciting to see this redevelop here on what used to be partially used parking. Next slide. And shifting from construction and preservation to tenant protection and outreach. HPD launched the certification of no harassment in fiscal year 19, adopting it here in Jerome, but also in Inwood. And the certification of no harassment is really to protect tenants from being harassed by landlords looking to make building improvements. They also piloting the Partners in Preservation here in the Jerome Avenue area, and partnered with the Northwest Bronx Community Clergy Coalition and CASA to create this Partners in Preservation. And the partners received money and support from the city to really create a hub for anti-displacement initiatives, whether that in local communities, and that's the idea, whether it's code enforcement or tenant organizing and education, legal representation, litigation, so that people who are really closely connected to the buildings and to the communities, that's where the local residents can go. So really important step. Part of that, they conducted workshops on Know Your Rights, but they're also conducting leadership development with individual tenants so they can develop leaders into tomorrow to support anti-harassment and anti-displacement measures. Next slide. And moving on from housing to transportation and to the corridor itself. To improve the conditions on Jerome and under the elevated train, we really had to, lean heavily on the Department of Transportation as well as the MTA. The latest improvement was, just this month, we had a ribbon cutting for the 170th Street elevator project that came online because during the planning process, it became very clear that this was a priority for many, many people as well as the agencies. And MTA agreed and built this in just 3 short years. During the planning process, there was no elevator on the entire corridor in the entire planning area. Yes, along Grand Concourse, but not in the planning area. And now here we have one strategically located on 170th Street, really convenient to bus connections that lead into Morrisania, but also up into High Bridge as well as University Heights. So a really important location for it. CDGOT is also deeply engaged in under the L program and the commercial corridor improvements. They received $50 million to make this work happen. It's in the design phase. It was paused because of COVID, but it's in the design phase. It's active again. So that would include everything from street furniture to special lighting and signage all along the corridor. Some of the step streets improvements really connecting the Bronx and connecting the corridor. Step streets are really important in the borough. Clifford Place step streets were reconstructed in 2019. That joins just north of the Cross Bronx, the Jerome Avenue corridor with the Grand Concourse. Davidson step streets joining the Jerome Avenue corridor with University Heights area. Other streets were repaved. City Bike has expanded to the area, and Edward L. Grant has seen really important improvements to the bus priority as well as protected bike lanes. And as a final note, as a part of the Jerome Avenue planning process, we focused, of course, on the Cross Bronx Expressway, which bisects the corridor and is one of the most the busiest and probably the most dangerous corridor crossings along the Durham Avenue corridor. So we focused on, well, what could we do to improve the crossings, as well as, think about strategic use of the open spaces that remain when the Cross Bronx was created in the area. Some of them are used as parks, some of them are just vacant. But as to expand on that, the city applied and received a grant from the federal government to study the Cross Bronx Expressway. It's $2 million, partnering with the City Department of Transportation, as well as the State Department of Transportation, and local community groups. Very excited to get that work underway. It's still early in the process, getting the grant agreements and things in place, but the work is to focus on reconnecting Bronx neighborhoods that were disrupted by and deeply affected by the Cross Bronx Expressway when it first went in. So some of that might be capping, but it might also just be street connections, park spaces, and also focusing on the Cross Bronx Expressway as the east-west connection that it is in the Bronx, since we have so few of those. And how can we make that a better functioning corridor overall? So that's really exciting work to come. I look forward to updating you on that in the near future. Now I'm going to turn it over to Sean to talk about parks and schools and businesses.
Great, and thanks, Carol. Next slide. And good afternoon, commissioners. Really excited to be here talking about some of these commitments as well. I'm going to talk through parks, open space, and schools, and then get into some really equally important programmatic commitments. Again, here we did not have large vacant parcels of city-owned property, and really needed to work with the community to maximize underutilized space and improve existing parks. You can see the map on the left shows how some of the active projects are distributed throughout the study area, and I'm going to talk through 3 of those projects. Also worth noting, Carol mentioned the coming work on the Cross Bronx. A number of park space was disrupted and broken apart. We'll have an opportunity to revisit some of those spaces as well. So I look forward to coming and talking about that in the future. Next slide. So the first is actually 2 connected projects: Aqueduct Walk expansion and Morton Playground. For those not familiar, Aqueduct Walk is a linear park which runs on the old Croton Aqueduct, of course, which formerly ran into Manhattan, providing fresh water to the city. It still continues, the old aqueduct still continues 40 miles to the north, where pieces of it have been converted into a really nice trail that's interspersed with more active park space. In the Bronx, it forms a really unique open space and community connector. However, the continuity of the trail itself is disrupted in certain portions. You can see the image on the lower left of the screen, about a quarter-mile portion starting at Burnside Avenue, which is kind of shown in right on that image, and going south to Morton Playground. There had once been a bridge connecting over Burnside Avenue. That stretch has not been open to the community for a number of years, and this project would reopen and improve that stretch. That would create new open space and reconnect communities. And then it would end at Morton Playground, where the construction there is already underway. And so the aqueduct expansion itself is in the design phase, and together these 2 projects will create some really important new open space, but also reconnect to other open spaces and serve as a connector for the community. Next slide. So Grant Park is a really good example of making the most out of existing space. There were 2 underutilized spaces that were bisected by the roadbed of Grant Avenue. So today you had about 2 acres of space that was usable by the community. But by closing Grant Avenue and connecting and fully opening both sides, we're able to more than double the park space. So you end up with what would be 4.5 acres of space. That would include it would overall be over a $25 million investment. Would include new lawn space, new basketball courts, and an adult fitness area. It recently won an award from the Public Design Commission for excellence in design, and the project is expected to start construction this year. Next slide. So this is Corporal Fisher Park, and you saw Carol speaking earlier to the southern parcel, which went in front of the commission in early 2020. So really what we had here are two parcels that were bisected by an existing housing development. On that southern parcel, that's where you saw the 70 units of new senior housing that will be coming online. And here, this will be a new park space that will include some landscape seating areas, game tables, and some passive space. The Parks Department went through the design phase with the community last year, and hopefully construction will begin soon. That's a total of a $3 to $5 million investment in the end. So really you get what were two unused spaces, a new park and new senior housing, really taking advantage of those parcels. Next slide. So a little bit about schools. We knew there was a great need here, but there was a lack of adequate sites. So we worked closely with the SCA and the community to find sites. In the end, we have the annex of PS 33. This was a school that was at 118% capacity. The annex was able to add 388 new seats, and that school annex is now open. In addition, two new schools will be built. You can see in the left in the northern portion in District 10, and then in the right in District 9, a new elementary school. And I think the image on the right really shows a project and why the planning process was valuable. This was a site we had found out that was going to be built out as self-storage. We were able to have a conversation with the owner and connect them to SCA. And now instead of self-storage, that is going to be one of the school sites. Those are both anticipated to open in 2024. Overall, the investment in schools was $190 million. Next slide. And now I'm going to talk through some programmatic commitments, which really involve some creative thinking, starting with small business workforce and economic development. Department of Small Businesses, of course, was a key partner throughout the planning process and continues to be today. Here we had two commercial district needs assessments, which were completed with community partners in the north and the south. That's Davidson Community Center and Wedco. And this resulted in ongoing grants to support things like merchant organizing, business support, services that they continue to work on today. During COVID, there was a shift in priorities and resources. And unfortunately, a number of businesses were damaged in 2020, but through these programs, they were able to get grants to 31 businesses along the Burnside Avenue corridor. Also, it was really important to be able to bring services out to the corridor and out to the community. So during the process, the mobile unit was out there monthly. We coordinated with the local council member, and that work still continues today. Next slide. So this is kind of a unique commitment. We knew that compliance with environmental and regulatory and permitting requirements, specifically for auto uses, was really important. It was identified early on as a need by the community, but something we struggled with an approach to. We found there are actually 11 city agencies that are involved in the permitting process in some way, but we knew that an enforcement citation-based approach was not what was needed here. So we found a program called Operation Eco Quality and partnered with the State Department of Environmental Compliance, which really took an education-based approach with an umbrella look at regulations, also met our Spanish language needs. And this program had previously been implemented in Hunts Point and Canarsie, and we were able to get them out to the corridor here. So they partnered with local organizations to visit a total of 85 sites along the corridor. And 75 of those sites were found to have some compliance needs. And this could be anything from permitting paperwork to material disposal or greater concerns like improper spray booths. Through this process and through the outreach, 59 of them were brought into compliance without any fines being levied. And this really went a long way in not only making a lot of these small businesses, but better neighbors. So next slide. So one of the recommendations from the community was to explore building an employment or a workforce network. And the model that was referenced was the Lower East Side Employment Network. In the end, this was really a different model that was needed here, was really focused on a few major developments and employers, where here we needed something that really casted a wider net and addressed barriers to entry into the workforce for this community. But during the planning process, we were able to bring in the lesson folks to really understand that model and understand what's right here. We brought in over 30 CBOs, employers, and resource providers over a period of a year to really understand what that should look like here. And you can see an image on the lower right-hand side of your screen, which was a map of how all of those resource providers interacted with each other. Probably a little tough to read, but we found that there was so much going on here, but there was really a lack of organizational structure. So eventually, we were able to bring in Jobs First as a technical assistance provider, and they continue with that work today. So the city was able to shift its role away from and allow the community to take over, and they continue to operate today as the Jerome Avenue Recommendation Collaborative. And what I think is a really great example that this is working here is as we're doing some of our planning work around the new Metro North service and growing job centers there, we're able to interface with this workforce network. Next slide. And then Davidson Community Center, Carol mentioned earlier, they were a partner throughout the process and really an anchor in the community. They operate today out of a small city building and do everything from food pantries to job training, after school activities, merchant organizing, and really important work during COVID as well. You know, they're really kind of the little engine that could in this community. They didn't have elevator access to the second floor, which really was limiting capacity. And we were able to get funding for improvements that will include an elevator, include a legalization of some basement space and some office reorganization that will really increase capacity for the center. This is going to end up as a $3.5 million improvement, and the work should begin soon. We're really excited to see this work happen. Next slide. And last slide, you know, these communities had some of the lowest health indicators in the city, and we were able to bring on Department of Health and Mental Hygiene early on as a partner and apply a health lens to all of the planning work, really understanding that health is connected to everything. And one of the outcomes was the Jerome Public Health Task Force, partnering with the council members. They actually released a report in October of 2020, and that report should serve as a guide to address health inequities around things like education, public outdoor space, healthcare quality and access, food environment, housing, and local economic development. So it's something that continues again on today and was a really important part of the planning process. So I think those are the slides we wanted to highlight today, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Sean, for that comprehensive presentation. Questions from the commission for either Carol or Sean? I don't hear any.
I see Commissioner Ortiz has her hand up. I don't know, Vice Chair, if you can see them. I can.
Thank you. Please.
Yeah.
Hi, Carol, Sean, I think this is an incredible work, and I want to congratulate you. I think that, the public realm improvements, new housing and economic development strategies are really encouraging. I wanted to ask some questions with respect to the goal that you mentioned, Carol, around retail continuity. That some of the new projects, I'm just curious, in terms of tracking 1331 Jerome, 1769 Jerome, both include new retail space, and wondering what kind of bites, the developers have had in terms of who might fill those spaces, and whether they've had any struggles, filling them, because I think that's something we certainly do want to track.
Yeah, that's a good question, because it's also, they're coming online during COVID, and this, very unusual time. I don't have an answer for you right now because nothing is really online. They're just on the cusp, or they're just coming. But we could, pull some of them and engage in a conversation with them about the commercial space. Absolutely willing to do that for you.
Yeah, that would be great. See if they've been having trouble or what their projections are. Is there, what is a mid-course correction look like?
Yeah.
Particularly because we don't think we're going to see the kind of robust demand return following COVID. I didn't think we would see it even before, but.
Well, I mean, anecdotally, what we know just during COVID, like Burnside and Tremont are two major commercial corridors. They have a merchants association that is interested in going in to be a bid, which is awesome. Really important milestone. And anecdotally, they're coming back, that they're not experiencing heavy vacancies. Sean, I don't know if there's anything else you would want to add. And that's just like the commercial atmosphere of the area. This is the site that is the most closest to opening 1769 Jerome. I think it's the closest. It might actually be the one further south, but pretty proximate to Tremont and Burnside. Sean, is there anything you would want to add?
No, I mean, we can certainly reach out more. I know with 1769, they specifically had, I think, a pre-K in the ground floor that was going to take up a good portion of that space that they had intended on originally. And we have had conversations with the merchants organization and the folks around Burnside, and SBS has been really active there. But we can certainly find out some more detail. The new developments are pretty early on at this point, but they must have an understanding. So,
thank you.
Okay, I see hands up from Commissioner Rampershad, Commissioner Marin, Commissioner Burney. Okay, I'll go in that order. Commissioner Rampershad.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Wonderful update. I just had two quick questions. With regards to Grant Park, funding, you said was secured, but you weren't sure of a start time. Is there a projected timeline of how long construction will take to complete this park?
I can find out the details of the construction timeline. We do know that they did complete the design work and should be actually starting construction this year, but I can find out some more details.
And the second question I had was with regards to the 59 establishments that I guess were brought into compliance. The other 16 required follow-up. Is that something that they're going to be doing within the next several months, or what's the timeline on that?
Sure. So, we did speak to state DEC, and we were in touch with them during the program. The 16 were uses that required additional follow-up, and they did have a pause on their program during COVID. So the hope is that once they get back online, they'll be able to follow up with those 16 businesses.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Commissioner Marin.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So first of all, thank you to the team. I think this is a very well put together presentation, and I really appreciate it, and it's timely. As you know, I was one of the early supporters of the Jerome Edward L. Grant rezoning for the purposes of preserving and developing more affordable housing. And so one of my questions is going to be, we have projected X number of units to be built, and X number that would be affordable, and then Y number that might be market. But it does appear that in this corridor, we're having a lot of HPD supported units that are 100% affordable. So I'd like to understand better what the number was projected and where we are today, and where we think we might be going. Because if this trend continues, we will have more affordable units than we thought we would have to begin with. So I'd like to understand that number a little bit better. And then secondly, you know, we have a couple of instances where there are some of the vestiges of the Cross Bronx Expressway that are left, which Sean mentioned. And is there any plan for redevelopment of those and what that may be? And then lastly, you know, the Grant Park and the Aqueduct Run, I think, are beautiful. I think it's a wonderful, welcome addition to that community, especially one that lacks parks, and will be a very welcome addition. I specifically like the Aqueduct Walk because of where it's situated, how it wraps around in the community, through the community. So you know, more important to me is the number of units that are being developed, but I just wanted to make those comments and thank the team for their work.
Thank you, Commissioner Marin. You know, so really you're curious how we're tracking against what we had originally projected. And what I would say to you is it's still early, especially given COVID, in like kind of like the whole projected growth cycle. And I think what we could do is take a little deeper dive into other development that's happening. We've highlighted the affordable housing, but there's a lot of other stuff that's, you know, background growth, and we should take a deeper dive into that.
Great. That would be good to know, because you're absolutely right. There are other things that are happening that you have not mentioned, and it would be good to understand what the whole scenario is. So thank you very much, Carol and Sean. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Burney.
Oh, thank you. I just have two questions or comments. The first is, you know, I really do think this is an exemplary piece of actual real neighborhood planning. And the way, I don't know who you had to kill or bribe to bring in all those other city agencies, but you get enormous credit for accomplishing that. And to me, you know, it begs the question of why aren't we doing this all the time? You know, it seems to me that every time we put down another several hundred units of MIH, you know, we've got to think about the retail and the education and the childcare and the recreation and the health every time we do it. And I assume there's a bandwidth issue here, because obviously it took an enormous amount of your resources to do this. But my question is, how can you expand this kind of activity to other places where we're increasing and putting in additional housing? And my second question, which is kind of slightly contradictory, what do you say to people who say, don't do this? You know, it just leads to gentrification and displacement, and there's racial disparities, and don't come to my neighborhood, we don't want it.
Really, two really good questions, and I appreciate the kind of contrast between the two. The truth is that we are taking a neighborhood approach for planning, really working hard to continue that into the Adams administration, thinking about the way that we as an agency get organized. We have new structures within the agency to help us focus on neighborhoods, helping the other agencies get organized. That does take leadership from the top to, you know, to improve the coordination and get us out of our silos, because we all do planning in our own way across the agencies. And then also providing funding that's available to this kind of neighborhood work through the Neighborhood Development Fund. You know, we had resources available to us so that when at the end of the day, we were like, well, you know, Davidson Community Center needs an elevator. How can we potentially, you know, fund that when it's otherwise would not rise to the top in the broader city budget? So I would say
that's an important point, because you want to avoid the kind of planning fatigue. You know, they came in, they did all this planning, but nothing happened.
Right.
So that's
exactly. And, you know, to the people who say don't do this, who are afraid of having it happen, I would say to you that change is happening even without planning, without neighborhood focuses. You know, those changes can happen, displacement can happen. And with the neighborhood focus, bringing all the agencies together, bringing all, you know, the focus on the preservation of a housing and tenant outreach, you know, we can help combat some of that. We can invest in neighborhoods that haven't seen investment, that have historically, you know, not received their fair share of investment for new parks and things like that, and shine a light on that. So I would say, you know, change is happening. Let's organize together and work to support the neighborhood going into the future.
Well, all power to you. Thank you.
The one point I would add to your first point, and thank you, Commissioner Burney, is, you know, a lot of this was new territory and is new territory for the agency, understanding workforce development and workforce networks better, understanding how to apply a health lens in the right way and have the right partnership with DOHMH and automotive compliance. But there are things that we now learn and are now tools that we can use at the agency, and probably use them more efficiently as we continue doing our planning work. And we should do that, and we should continue, to push it. And I think we are.
Good point, Sean. Good point.
Thank you. Commissioner Capelli.
Yes, I wanted to just weigh in on the idea that this is a wonderful presentation. As I'm so happy to see this. Unfortunately, I wasn't on the commission when most of these actions took place. Although I'm not new, most of it took place prior to the summer of 2018 when I joined. So thank you. Commissioner Edie and Vice Chair Knuckles knows that I may be from Staten Island, but I'm really a Bronx boy, and I love this neighborhood and I love what you're doing. And my God, city planning involved in planning. What a concept. Thank you.
You're welcome to the Bronx anytime.
Commissioner Levin.
Yeah, well, I'll join the chorus here. You guys are fabulous. And it's, this was a heroic effort to get this done, but I think also a model for, as Commissioner Birdie said, for how we ought to be doing it across the city. And just picking up on the last comment you made in response to him, Carol, the more information you can collect about how this all played out, what got built, how many units are where, how many are affordable, how did the tenant protection stuff work out, how was the business support, how did it all play out? We can begin to develop some hard data to push back against this notion that any change in the neighborhood is going to lead to higher prices, higher rents, and chasing out the people who are there. That's a story we need to get, that we hear in every rezoning, but we need some, we need to get beyond the fears and the hyperbole with some concrete information about how we can do this well. And it does seem to me that the Jerome Avenue, this corridor rezoning is the place we might be able to do that. So keep collecting those bits and pieces and use them to tell the best story possible.
Thank you for the encouragement. Thank you. Absolutely, Commissioner.
Any other questions or observations? Okay, thank you again, Bronx office,
Thank
Carol
you.
and Sean. Thanks very much.
All right. I will now, we do thank you guys, and we'll get back to our regular agenda, which we do have a special public meeting scheduled. And so I think we should open the special public meeting. Mr. Secretary, can you
call the roll?
Will do.
Call the roll. Let's do that. Yes.
All right. Good afternoon, commissioners. This is the City Planning Commission special public meeting held remotely through the NYC Engage portal. Today is Monday, January 31st, 2022. I will now call the roll. Vice Chairman Knuckles.
Here.
Commissioner Burney.
Here.
Commissioner Capelli.
Here.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Here.
Commissioner Dweck.
Here.
Commissioner Edie.
Here.
Commissioner Goodrich.
Here.
Commissioner Levin.
Here.
Commissioner Manine.
You're on mute.
Here.
Orlando. All right.
Commissioner
Here.
Ortiz.
Here.
Commissioner Rampachat.
Here.
A quorum is present. The first item is the approval of the minutes of the public meeting of Wednesday, January 19th, 2022.
On the minutes, motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion to approve.
Aye.
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 The minutes are approved. Thank you.
The next item, Commissioners, scheduling calendar numbers 1 through 10. We have resolutions for adoption, scheduling Wednesday, February 16th, 2022 for a remote public hearing to be held through the NYC Engage portal.
On the resolutions, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? The resolutions are adopted.
The next part of the calendar is the reports section on page 17. Reports, Borough of Brooklyn, calendar number 11, CD5, C220102 HUK, in a matter of an application for the Fifth Amendment to the East New York 1 Urban Renewal Plan for the East New York 1 Urban Renewal Area. For a favorable report on calendar number 11, Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Burney,
Yes.
Commissioner Capelli,
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Goodrich.
Abstain. I was only here for part of it.
Okay. Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Rampachat.
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 11. Borough of Queens, calendar number 12, CD7, C200122 MMQ, in a matter of an application for a city map amendment concerning Clearview Pump Station rehabilitation. For a favorable report on calendar number 12, Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Burney,
Yes.
Commissioner Capelli,
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Goodrich,
Same.
Commissioner Goodrich abstain, Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Manin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Rampachat.
Yes.
Favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 12. Borough of Queens, calendar number 13, CD6, N220160 PXQ, in a matter of a notice of intent to acquire office space for the use of property located at 97-77 Queens Boulevard. For a favorable report on calendar number 13, Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Burney,
Yes.
Commissioner Capelli,
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Goodrich,
Same.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Manin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Rampachat.
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 13. Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 14, CD1, N220153 PXM, in a matter of a notice of intent to acquire office space for use of property located at 27 Cliff Street. For a favorable report on calendar number 14, Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Burney,
Yes.
Commissioner Capelli,
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Goodrich,
Yes.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Manin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Rampachat.
Yes.
Favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 14. Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 15 has been withdrawn. Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 16 and 17, CD11, calendar number 16, C220059 ZSM, calendar number 17, C220260 HAM, in a matter of an application for a special permit and the designation of an urban development action area and project and disposition of city-owned property concerning Castle 3, 107-111 East 123rd Street. For favorable reports on calendar numbers 16 and 17, Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Burney,
Yes.
Commissioner Capelli,
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Goodrich,
Same reason.
okay, Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Manin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Rampachat.
Yes.
Favorable reports have been adopted on calendar numbers 16 and 17. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 18, CD3, C200357 MMR, in a matter of an application for a city map amendment concerning Amboy Road reconstruction. For a favorable report on calendar number 18, Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Burney,
Yes.
Commissioner Capelli,
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Goodrich,
Abstain.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Rampachat.
Yes.
Favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 18. Borough of Staten Island, calendar numbers 19 and 20, CD2, calendar number 19, N220284 ZCR, calendar number 20, N220122 ZCR, in matter of applications for the grant of certifications concerning 35 Julianne Court for adoption on calendar numbers 19 and 20. Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Burney,
Yes.
Commissioner Capelli,
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Goodrich,
Abstain.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Rampachat.
Yes.
Calendar numbers 19 and 20 have been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar numbers 21 and 22, our last voting item for today, Commissioners. CD2, calendar number 21, N220022 ZAR. Calendar number 22, N220023 ZAR. In a matter of applications for the grant of authorizations concerning 35 Douglas Court for adoption on calendar numbers 21 and 22. Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Burney,
Yes.
Commissioner Capelli,
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Goodrich,
Abstain.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz,
Yes.
Commissioner Rampachat.
Yes.
Calendar numbers 21 and 22 have been adopted. Thank you, Commissioners.
Mr. Secretary, is there any other business before the commission?
No, Mr. Vice Chair, we're done with the special public meeting today, sir.
Thank you. Accordingly, this portion of the remotely held meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Time is 1:57 p.m.
All right, back to our review session agenda. The first item on our agenda is a certification of a zoning map and zoning text amendments in Queens Community District 6. Our presenter is Joy Razor. Joy?
Hey, good afternoon, Commissioners. Next slide, please. This is a private application for a zoning map amendment from an R4B to an R6A zoning district, as well as a zoning text amendment to establish an MIH area in Forest Hills, Queens, Community District 6. Next slide. Here's a map of the existing land use and zoning in the surrounding area. The project area was initially zoned R71 in 1961 with the adoption of the zoning resolution and was rezoned again in 2002 as part of the Forest Hills Rego Park rezoning, which affected 61 blocks south of Queens Boulevard. The project area is located within a low-density R4B pocket surrounded by an R71 district, which contains multifamily apartment buildings ranging from 6 to 13 stories in height. The surrounding area has seen a number of rezonings over the past few years, including most recently, the 9881 Queens Boulevard rezoning. Next slide. Here's an aerial view with the project area indicated in black and the development site in red. The project area is loosely bounded by Weatherall Street to the south and 67th Avenue to the east, and is within the transit zone. The project area is well served by transit and is accessible via the M and the R subway lines at the 67th Avenue station, which is only 2 blocks north of the project area. It's also served by 7 bus lines. The development site includes lots 49 and 50, which are improved with 2-story, 2-family residential buildings owned by the applicant. Next slide. For additional context, here's a view of the backside of the project area looking south. You can see the existing mid-rise multifamily apartment buildings and the Long Island Railroad tracks beyond them. Next slide. Photos 1, 2, and 3 show the project area facing northeast, northwest, and south from Weatherall Street, providing context of the existing 2-story residences and taller multifamily apartment buildings in the distance. Next slide. Photo 4 shows homes along 67th Avenue, which are included in the project area, and this is looking east from Weatherall Street. Photos 5 and 6 provide additional context of the higher density development that exists along 67th Avenue. Next slide. The applicant is proposing an 8-story, 18,000 square foot building containing 21 dwelling units, 5 to 6 of which would be made affordable pursuant to MIH. The development would contain an FAR of 3.6 and rise to a height of 75 feet. Next slide, please. Here's a ground floor plan of the development, and I want to note that this view has shifted, so north is to the lower right. The ground floor would contain the residential lobby entrance, indicated in yellow, along with the mailroom and bike parking area, which would hold 11 bikes. 8 parking spaces would be accessible on the ground floor via an existing curb cut along Weatherall Street. Next slide. Here's a sample floor plan of floors 2 through 7, which would contain a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. The 8th floor would contain a few units along with an open terrace space. Next slide. The applicant is proposing a zoning map amendment from, next slide, please. The applicant is proposing a zoning map amendment from an R4B to an R6A zoning district. R6A provides medium density and a maximum residential FAR of 3.6. Next slide. The applicant is also seeking a zoning text amendment to map MIH options 1 and 2. Option 1 would provide 25% of residential floor area at 60% AMI, or around $61,000 annually for a family of 3. Option 2 would provide 30% of residential floor area at 80% AMI, or around $82,000 annually for a family of 3. For context, Queens Community District 6 has a median income of around $90,000, or roughly 85% AMI for a family of 3. This is 28% higher than the citywide median of around $70,000. Next slide. To summarize, the applicant is seeking 2 actions: a zoning map amendment to rezone the project area from an R4B to an R6A district, as well as a zoning text amendment to establish an MIH area. The proposed development would rise to a height of 75 feet and would include 21 dwelling units and 8 ground floor parking spaces. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Joy. Just let me see where there are questions. Commissioner Rompershot.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I know we normally don't get into detail about the plans, but just have the applicant just double check this parking layout to make sure it actually works. I know they don't have required parking because they're in the transit zone, but they have a trash chute that's going directly above and the other 7 floors from the grade. So I just don't know what happened on the ground level where they're showing parking. So if they can just confirm that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Goodrich, I believe I saw your hand up.
I just had a quick question of clarification. So the 5 to 6 units out of the 21 is the max amount through MI, the 20%, the max amount that they can offer through MIH, or is that correct?
Yes, so it would be 25 to 30% of the 21 housing units that they're providing.
That's the required,
So 30%
what's required for MIH. So that's what's mandatory for them to provide.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner Goodrich? Okay. Commissioner Levin.
Yes, Joy, I wonder what the logic is between around the project area boundaries. On the one hand, you could see pushing it all the way down Weatherall to take in that whole row of residences. Or on the other hand, you could see stopping it at the development site. So how was that one lot to the west included, but not the others? What's going on here?
Sure. So we drew the boundary from 67th Avenue to about 175 feet, just to provide some consistency and also as a buffer between the R71 and the R4B district. I believe the intention was just to provide some cushion space, but I can get back to you with exactly what the rationale was for that.
Okay. Well, it also depends on what we hear from the community in the public review process. Thank you.
Joy, maybe you should just elaborate briefly on the department's rationale for what you see the justification for additional density in this area.
Absolutely. So the applicant believes that the density is appropriate here. They're 2 blocks from the subway. This is an area that's extremely well served by transit, and it's also a higher income neighborhood. Forest Hills has been ranked as one of the better neighborhoods for families in Queens. We've seen a lot of growth recently, and over the past few years, we've also seen a number of private rezoning applications come through. So there's definitely demand for housing in this area. We wanted to definitely include the block end just to provide some continuity between the higher density R71 district and the adjacent R4B district as well. But the applicant believes that this is a good opportunity zone.
Okay. Other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Joy.
Thank you.
And this is certified.
Yes.
Thanks, the magic word. Thank you.
Yes.
So the second item on our agenda is a post-referral review of a non-ULURP, which is a renewal of a previously approved authorization in Manhattan Community District 2. Our presenter is Connor Clark.
Good afternoon, commissioners. This is a private application by WVH Housing Corporation, which seeks a renewal pursuant to section 1143 for a period of 3 years of a previously approved authorization to eliminate all 168 required parking spaces accessory to West Village Houses, a cooperative housing development located in Manhattan Community District 2. The application was referred to the Community Board on December 22nd, 2021, and is back to the CPC for a vote. The original authorization pursuant to section 13443 was granted in 2017 and lapsed on August 23rd, 2021, after the applicant submitted the renewal application. The shareholders of West Village Houses subsequently voted to sell the garage site. No specific development proposal for the garage site exists at this time. Next slide. The garage, which is outlined in red on the map, is located at 738-742 Greenwich Street in Greenwich Village on the corner of Greenwich Street and Perry Street. It functions as an off-site accessory garage to the West Village Houses indicated in blue on the map, which are located on several blocks along Washington Street from Bank Street in the north to Morton Street in the south. West Village Houses is a 42-building residential development containing 420 dwelling units. At the time of construction in the early 1970s, the required parking for the C17 zoning district in which it was located was 40% of dwelling units, or 168 spaces. The existing garage contains 240 spaces, with the additional 72 spaces available to the public. The applicant indicated at the time of the original parking reduction application that 9 of the 168 required spaces were being used by residents of West Village Houses. Next slide. The area map shows West Village Houses, including the garage site, is located partially in the original C17 zoning district and partially in 2 separate C16A districts. It is surrounded by a mix of residential and commercial uses with a handful of industrial establishments remaining. The area has gained an increasingly residential character as a result of new residential development and conversions of some commercial and industrial buildings to residential use. Next slide. This close-up of the area map shows the West Village Houses development outlined in red along the left-hand side and the garage on the upper right. Next slide. These site photos show the typical building type that characterizes West Village houses. Next slide. We can go to the next slide. Previous one. You skipped one. Yeah, that one. So these photos show the garage site. The photo on the top right shows the south and east facades of the garage. Next slide. The site plan shows the full layout of West Village Houses development. The garage site is outlined in red on the right-hand side of the drawing. Next slide. And here's a close-up of the garage site with all the dimensions. Next slide. The applicant seeks a renewal pursuant to section 1143 for a period of 3 years of an authorization to eliminate all 168 required accessory parking spaces. Community Board 2 reviewed the application and approved it unanimously with 1 recusal on January 20th. The board noted that its resolution in 2017, when the application was first filed, was to recommend denial unless the sale of the garage were to benefit the community by protecting long-term affordability at West Village Houses. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner Capelli.
This doesn't relate specifically to this application, but as an advocate of mass transit, I also recognize that in order for tourism and commercial enterprises to exist in Manhattan, there needs to be parking for out-of-town individuals and people who don't have mass transit available to them. So I would just remind us that we need to seek a balance, and that communities will be, in many instances, anxious to get rid of these parking garages, but they are also, in many instances, important to the city's economic vitality.
Duly noted. Other questions or observations? Not seeing any. So Ryan, the sole action before us is to vote on the renewal of the authorization. Is that correct?
That's right. We usually do this by an assent by show of hands, so we can call for a yay or nay vote.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. The motion for renewal carries.
All right. Moving on, for the third item on the agenda is a post-referral review of a non-ULURP, a renewal of a previously approved special permit. Our presenter is Jasmine DePaul. Similar action to be taken.
Okay. Jasmine?
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Sorry, I was on mute. So this is a private application for the first renewal of a special permit pursuant to section 1143. The special permit was granted in 2017. It modified the height and setback regulations of section 4343 to facilitate the construction of an 8-story enlargement over an existing 4-story building located at 1164 Broadway, which is in Manhattan Community District 5. Next slide. 1164 Broadway is in Midtown Manhattan and is generally bound by Broadway to the west, West 28th Street to the north, West 27th Street to the south, and 5th Avenue to the east. The lot is mapped on an M16 district. The single zoning lot is shared by 3 buildings, including the proposed development 1164 Broadway, as well as 1170 Broadway and 12 West 28th Street. All 3 buildings are internally connected and house the Nomad Hotel and related uses. The site and surrounding area are within the Madison Square North Historic District. The Landmarks Preservation Commission, the LPC, designated the historic district in 2001. This area is primarily developed with small, mid-size, and large buildings occupied by wholesale office and related commercial uses, ground floor retail space, and public parking. Next slide. The proposed development at 1164 Broadway, which you can see on the picture to the right, is an existing 4-story building and currently contains a ground floor restaurant use and hotel use above. 1170 Broadway, which you can see on the bottom left picture, the building with the spire directly neighbors 1164 Broadway and is a 12-story plus penthouse building that contains ground floor retail and hotel use above. This building is also the main entrance into the Nomad Hotel. 12 West 28th Street, which you can see on the top left picture, neighbors 1170 Broadway and is a 4-story building that contains ground floor retail use and hotel use above. Next slide. Through the special permit, the applicant is seeking to construct an 8-story enlargement over the existing 4-story building at 1164 Broadway. The proposed development will add 18,302 square feet of hotel use through the construction of 36 new hotel rooms. The existing ground floor restaurant use will remain, and guests of the Nomad Hotel will continue to use the main entrance at 1170 Broadway. New internal openings will be created to connect the proposed development at 1164 Broadway to 1170 Broadway on the 5th through 12th floors. And currently there are existing internal connections between the 2nd through 4th floor. Next slide. The original application for 1164 Broadway modified the height regulations in an M1 district. So 1164 Broadway street wall would rise to a total height of 148.5 feet or 12 stories, which is about 63.5 feet or 6 stories above the permitted front wall height. The proposed street wall height will match the street wall height of the adjacent hotel at 1170 Broadway. The total height of 12 West 28th Street will remain the same at about 56 feet. The original application also modified the setback in an M1 district. An M16 district requires a 15-foot initial setback from a wide street such as Broadway. The proposed development includes a penthouse suite, which will be set back about 16 feet from the street line. And although this massing would not comply with the bulk requirements applicable to enlargements in the M16 district, the LPC prefers this design because it would conform with the massing of 1170 Broadway, which is the contributing structure to the historic district. Other buildings in the historic district have street walls that rise without visible setbacks from the street line. And many buildings along Broadway rise to a height of 12 stories or greater, which you can get a sense of in this neighborhood character diagram shown here. In the current renewal, there is no changes to the design or massing at 1164 Broadway, and the structures remain as originally considered by the CPC. Next slide. On May 10, 2017, the CPC granted the special permit, noting that the modifications to the height and setback regulations are appropriate and consistent with the scale of the neighboring buildings of comparable or taller heights. They further note that the development would have minimal adverse effects on the structures or open space in the areas in terms of scale, location, and access to light and air. The Landmark Preservation Commission also issued a certificate of appropriateness in 2016, supporting the 8-story enlargement at 1164 Broadway. The permit expired as of October 27, 2021, and the applicant has since received an extension from the LPC for an additional 4 years until October 27, 2025. The applicant intends to begin construction this year if the renewal of the special permit is granted. Next slide. This application was referred to Manhattan Community Board 5 on November 4th, 2021. Manhattan CB5 waived their vote, but did note that they supported the original application for the special permit. And with no changes to that application, they have no issues with the current renewal. So in summary, the applicant is seeking the first renewal of special permit pursuant to section 1143, which will facilitate the 8-story enlargement to an existing 4-story building. This will add 18,302 square feet of hotel use to the existing Nomad Hotel. There is no change to the design or massing at 1164 Broadway, and the structures remain as originally considered by the CPC. In order to renew the special permit, the CPC shall find that the facts upon which the special permit were granted have not substantially changed. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jasmine. Are there questions? If not, save for the pandemic, I don't believe there have been any changes in the facts around this project. So we'll call for a vote for the renewal. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Jasmine. So the fourth item on our agenda is a city council modification scope determination for 415 Madison Avenue special permits. Azka Mohideen is here to discuss. I will note that Commissioner Cirillo is recused on this item.
Thank you, Ryan.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This application by 415 Madison Avenue LLC for a special permit pursuant to Section 81-645 of the zoning resolution and a related application for a special permit pursuant to Section 81-685 was approved by the City Planning Commission on December 1st, 2021. The two Greater East Midtown special permits facilitate a new 40-story commercial office building with a public concourse. The special permit pursuant to Section 81-645 allows applicant to increase the floor area permitted on the development site by 3 FAR from 21.6 FAR to 24.6 FAR for the provision of an open-air public concourse on the ground floor. On January 27th, the City Council voted on the application and proposed a draft modification. Next slide, please. The public concourse is a 2,377 square foot space occupying the most prominent corner of the site. It has been designed to encourage circulation from both street frontages with direct connection to the east side access entrance. The concourse also includes a passive recreation space with various seating options and artwork to be located in the space shown with the dashed red line in the image on the right. Addressing the concern that a future artwork may overwhelm the space to the detriment of public use, the City Council modification would add the following note on 2 of the approved drawings. The artwork installations shall be of a size, configuration, and materiality that do not adversely impact the use of the adjoining benches for sitting. The department has reviewed the proposed change and determined that the proposed modification raises no land use or environmental issues requiring further review. Happy to take any questions.
Questions for Azka? I don't believe there are any questions.
I don't see any.
And this is within scope.
Yes, that's so all we'll ask is a sent by show of hands, yay or nay vote to send a letter to the city council, essentially saying that there's no scope issues.
Aye.
Yay. Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
All right.
Aye.
That's good. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Azka. So moving on to post-hearing follow-up, we have 660, 668 East Fordham Road. Geethanjali Minarajesh is here to discuss. Is there a follow-up here on this project?
Thank you, Ryan. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is a post-hearing follow-up for 660, 668 East Fordham Road. The application has sent us a letter and a parking study that is attached with the material, which is intended to address the questions from January 5th public hearing. The applicant addressed CPC questions, which included how they are going to meet the findings to waive the on-site parking, concerns over the unit mix, and question on the potential shadow impact on nearby botanical garden. To address the question of there being a potential shadow impact, this image is from Fordham Road Rezoning AIS, which analyzed the applicant site as a fully built out C45D building that is similar to the applicant's proposal. The red dashed line here shows the maximum projected shadow that will not reach the botanical garden. Next slide, please. To address the questions on the unit mix, the applicant stated that they chose this unit mix to address the local market demand. The applicant owns and operates businesses in the immediate area and felt there was a lack of small units that would be able to provide housing to young professionals and graduate students that will work in the nearby medical buildings as well as Fordham University. The applicant also notes that the unit mix has been approved by HPD and the building's mechanical systems has been designed around this unit mix. Next slide, please. The applicant conducted a parking study to further support the findings in this parking special permit waiver that it will not have undue effects on residents, businesses, or community facilities in the surrounding area, including the availability of parking spaces. The existing parking capacity in the area shows that there are 918 total parking spaces, not including the spaces that were not visible, such as the ones nearby Fordham University parking garage, which is highlighted in blue towards the north of the graphic here. The existing capacity breaks down to 802 on-street parking and 116 off-street parking spaces. Peak utilization rates are between 80 to 90%, resulting in 187 parking spaces remaining at 80% and 93 parking spaces remaining at 90%, with these peak times on Wednesdays 11 a.m., 12 p.m., 4 p.m., and Saturday 11 a.m. The proposed development would create a peak demand of 58 spaces. The peak parking demand does not align with the peak utilization times, with the peak parking demand being between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. on peak weekdays. During this peak demand, the development would create a need for 34 spaces. The peak parking need for the proposed development would be between 7 p.m. to the morning commute, when there are 209 on-street or off-site parking spaces available. In addition to the 47 required parking spaces that are built out as requirement for the restrictive declaration, the applicant will add an additional 9 on-site parking spaces for the residential building, thereby reducing on-street or off-site peak parking demands to 49 spaces. The applicant also notes that the automobile ownership rates in the area is lower than the citywide averages, which this parking analysis was based on. And there would be 45 vehicles projected to be owned by the residents in this area. To summarize the applicant's responses, the proposed development will not have an overlap between the peak demand and the peak utilization times. The vehicle ownerships are projected to be lower in this development. There are additional parking spaces such as the Fordham garage that were not considered part of the study, and there will be an additional 9 new parking spaces built on site for residences. Throughout these points, the applicant states that they are meeting the findings by showing that they are able to not have any undue adverse effects on residents, businesses, or community facilities in this area. This concludes my presentation, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Commissioner Levin, followed by Commissioner Goodrich.
Yes, Keith Andrelli, thank you for that. I'm glad that we now that you worked with the applicant to get the parking study, because that at least gives us a basis for making the finding that's required for this waiver. I guess I would ask initially, so if they're now putting 9 spaces into the project, are they amending their application so that they're only waiving? The original application was to waive all 59 spaces, but if they're including 9 parking spaces, is the waiver going to be reduced to 50 spaces?
My understanding is the waiver, the initial application waiver is not changing, but this is an additional units which they added after the first public meeting which we had, and based on the comments they revised it.
Wait, additional residential units, or we're allowing them now to, they have a 59 space requirement under zoning. They're providing 9 on site, but we would still be giving them a waiver for all 59 spaces. So they might not have to build those 9.
Let's confirm that.
Let's figure that out.
Yeah. Let's confirm that, Keith, because I understand the question from Commissioner Levin. I want to make sure because there may be, the question is, I guess, is there a new drawing that shows 50 or 9 spaces required, and whether that would be what happens.
Or 9 spaces required, provided.
Provided, right.
So that only 50 additional, so that only 50 need to be waived.
Yeah. So that we can look into.
One observation about the study is that, it's easy to throw, well, first off, I'm really glad they did the study. I think that was essential to our considering this application. I'll point out that one of the sites that they identify as having on-site parking is 20 spaces on the development site. So I don't think they can count those as spaces that are available to meet existing demand, because they're going to be gobbled up by the development. But, you know, that may not change the overall conclusion here. I guess all I would ask, and you know, I am not a parking hawk, although I don't know, is a parking hawk one that wants the parking to go away, or one that wants there to be maximized parking? I mean, in my view, all of these parking requirements are long overdue for reconsideration in a modern era where we are trying to use space for things other than cars. So I don't really know where I go with this observation, but I guess I would ask if the department staff is satisfied that we now have the data that will support the waiver that is being sought here.
I mean, I could let the borough office speak to this, but you know, I reviewed the parking and materials provided, and it's you know, this is the type of study that is, you know, like you said, meets the findings, right? It helps us meet the finding.
Yeah.
And I think they provided the spaces because there are required spaces for the parking across the street, and they were showing that as a resource, as in terms of the community facility crush would, you know,
I was just pointing out they're counting the thing that's used as a parking lot now is shown as being available as 20 off-site parking, but that's going to be occupied by
that will be occupied
by a building. You know, I guess it's going to show that the report does show that this is a tight neighborhood for on-street parking, and they're counting on a lot of those on-street parking spaces to be available, and they're getting up to like 90% occupied, and that means a lot of people are circling the block looking for a place to park, but it does show some availability. So I guess my harder question to the Bronx office was, is this good enough? Are we close enough? Do we have the numbers that justify a finding that there is available parking in the neighborhood?
One thing I would say is, you know, this is the first time that we've seen this as a standalone special permit. It's always been part of a larger development, and so I think this is the level of study we would want to see, and you know, sets the bar for the information we would want to see to meet that finding. So we do think the information provided is the right level of information, and if we had another, that's kind of what we would be looking for to meet that last finding.
Okay, no, I guess if you were a commissioner, Sean, would you vote in favor of this thing? Do you think we're satisfying our responsibility for sound planning in this neighborhood by letting this thing get built with so few parking spaces for residents of the building?
Yeah, I mean, we created this special permit, you know, for a reason, and they've shown findings that they believe are meeting those findings. And, you know, I think, you know, that's a level of information, and they show that they've met
they passed your level of plausibility.
Yeah, okay. They did a detailed enough study that does show that they meet those findings.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for getting us this far too.
When do we vote on this, Ryan?
We will be voting on this on February 16th. So we have one more, we can discuss this on the 14th if there's any further things, but yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on this item?
There was a lot of discussion with that particular application about the unit mix and how there were only 5 2 bedrooms and most of them were 1 bedroom. And I think one question I do have is and this is just a general question, when an applicant, proposes something, are they able to change the actual unit mix, or is that fixed by some other,
So this action will not lock in any unit mix or requirement. The units do drive the amount of parking, but by going in the other direction, by making the units larger, if that was what ultimately happens, which is sort of the direction I think, the Bronx Borough president wanted them to go, there would be fewer units. They would then reduce the number of spaces that would then be waived. And so they could absolutely do that later on after this approval. That would not be a problem. Yeah. And
But
so
we would-
this action doesn't lock them into a unit count. And it's very rare that our actions would do that, the city planning actions. I don't want to say never because the zoning resolution is big, but it's very rare that we would do that.
So just so I have it correct. So let's say when this applicant came before us and many commissioners were a bit concerned about this, can they change that beforehand and commit to it, or it's only after they get the approval that they
could change it at any time? Yeah.
Okay.
The unit count can be changed. Yeah. Sort of anytime.
And then my last question, I think I asked this before, but I just want to clarify. If anyone, I always, if anyone's being displaced, if there are any, I think I asked this on a few of them and we didn't have the information at the time. So I just wanted to.
I don't believe there's any. Is there housing on the site?
But
there are no active businesses on the site today. It is a parking lot.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of that.
Thank you. Any further questions on this item?
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. On 870 and 888 Atlantic Avenue and 1034, 1042 Atlantic Avenue, Jonah is here with a little additional follow-up, I believe. Jonah?
Great. Thanks, Ryan. Good afternoon, commissioners. Next slide, please. Oh, it looks like this might be a different presentation.
It says 870 and 1034.
Yeah. Jonah, you initially just had a photo of I believe it was the 870 site, right?
Yes. I can, would it be helpful if I just pull that up right now?
Sure, you can share your screen.
Apologies. I just might need a quick moment.
We see it, Jonah, I believe.
Oh, okay, great.
Wait, no, I'm sorry. That was the old presentation.
Yeah, that was the old presentation. I don't know if that just got in the.
All right, I have it right now. Sorry about that. Everyone can see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Apologies. Great. So sorry again for that inconvenience. So just as a quick response to questions at the prior post-hearing follow-up, to your question, Commissioner Goodrich, regarding the 870-888 Atlantic Avenue application to check the status of the residential units on the development site. We wanted to get back to you. The applicant did confirm that there are 2 market rate residential units occupied by tenants that are not currently on a lease. The applicant has indicated a willingness to assist those tenants during relocation. And the above image just is meant to visualize that. So there are a number of vacant businesses on the ground floor and the units.
Jonah, I'm still seeing the first page of this, and it's not in full screen mode. I don't know.
I'm gonna go to the second slide.
Yeah.
And go to, see if you can go.
Sorry. Can everybody see?
Perfect.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry again. So we want to note as well that the residential use on the site is a pre-existing non-conforming use as the area is currently mapped in an M11 district. We also want to note that as part of the site's redevelopment, it would result in the removal of these units. That being said, the proposed development would replace them with a total of 228 units, of which between 46 to 69 would be permanently affordable based on the selected MIH option. And again, just as an example, so a household of two earning $50,000 approximately a year at 60% AMI would pay $1,204 per month for a one-bedroom apartment. And if they earned $66,860 per year at 80% AMI, then they would pay $1,651 per month. And then lastly, with respect to the 1034-1042 Atlantic Avenue application further to the east, again, we want to note that there are no existing residential units on that development site. And so I'm happy to take any further questions if you have them. And thanks again for the chance to follow up.
Okay, are there any questions? I can't get my screen to. Ryan, do you see any questions?
Yes, Commissioner Goodridge has her hand up.
Please, Commissioner.
So one of the things that really stood out at the hearing was someone testified that in this neighborhood alone, that 11,000 Black people had left, I think in the last, or either were displaced or forcibly displaced or left through the last census. And they actually cited to a DCP report for that. And I was actually wanted to follow up I'm not sure if that was a racial impact study or if it was another report, but I found that really jumped out to me because I'm a native Brooklynite and I see it myself of people leaving but it's another thing to actually have a DCP report that supports that. And I wanted to talk about it in the context of this application because that seems to be one of the main points that people brought up in opposition to it. Not just the gentrification, but also, the displacement. It's something that Commissioner Levin alluded to before with another project, but I thought it would be good to talk about it and actually have, which DCP report, was this? And I also know that I have lots of questions, so let me stop there.
Sure, thank you for that question. I guess to just clarify, so it wasn't exactly a report, it was a presentation on population and demographic trends. That was part of our study engagement for MCrown. And that was presented to Community Board 8, who have been kind of the main stakeholders for the study. The report did analyze or did look at trends based on the census data starting from 2000 to mainly to 2019. And then we updated the data as well when we received the 2020 census. It looked at the census tracts that overlap within a quarter mile of MCrown. I don't have the visualization out, but I think just geographically, it covers a pretty wide swath of Brooklyn, roughly the size of a community district as far as population. And we did find that there was a trend, a decline in the Black population, which we do take very seriously. We want to understand why that is. And I think ultimately what we believe is that there are many different reasons for these demographic trends, and parts of Brooklyn show an increase in the Black population. So our approach for that particular presentation was really just to have a discussion first about the data itself and the trends and listen to the community. And then in future discussions, we've brought in HPD, which we continue to engage with them to really discuss issues that are tied to displacement and tenant harassment. So I hope that answers your question. Sorry for the long-winded response.
Yeah. Yeah, because I, you know, I'll let someone else go if I don't want to hog it up, but I obviously have a lot of comments. So if someone else has a comment or question.
I don't see any other any questions, any hands raised at the moment, Commissioner, so proceed.
Okay, so I think I'm most concerned about, even without the racial impact, the lack of affordable housing. And specific to that area, there's been so much rezoning specifically in that area and so much development that do we actually have anything to show what the impact has been in that specific district? Because I think my main concern is what, there's obviously information presented that of some of the positive things that the project would bring. And we obviously had, some folks in support, which I actually want to speak to in a bit, but then we also see the actual effects. And I also, just wanted to say, we've had, like, as far as I can see, there's only been one union coming to testify that the projects would bring jobs. But for me, it's one union in New York City. And so I would love to hear of other folks who've been on the commission, but I think for me, that strikes me as very insufficient, really. Just because it's not clear to me, that it could be any union really coming to say, but one union is different from, say, like 5 or 10 saying, we've spoken to this developer and these jobs are going to be for people in the community at a respective salary. But those are just my initial thoughts and concerns, really. And I know the area really well, and I can actually see and visualize what new development would bring. And so those are my main concerns. And I'd love to hear other thoughts about it from folks. But I just wanted to bring it up as a topic of conversation. This is what people talk about. The first thing people say is gentrification and racialized displacement whenever I hear about Atlantic Avenue projects, period. And so I wanted to just bring it up as a topic of conversation.
I just wanted to point out, Commissioner, these are very good questions, right? This is why Jonah made that presentation 2 weeks ago to the commission that spoke to the commission about, our experience with the demographic changes here and the impact of development in the surrounding area, right? And so we can certainly go back to that presentation and discuss it with you again. At that time, Jonah talked mostly about indirect displacement, which is what you're referring to in part. You then asked the question about direct displacement, which led us to check in with the applicants about who is on the site, which is what Jonah was presenting today.
Right.
I don't know, Ryan, would it be helpful for us to have a separate meeting?
Yeah.
Because I think you would love to share more.
Discuss. We can have a separate discussion with this, and I think one of the things we've learned over the past couple of years is that these projects, there's an evolving conversation, and Jonah and Winston can speak more to it with the community that they're having here as well, about what the desires are for the future and how this all fits together. So I think that we can continue to have those conversations. I see
Yes.
Commissioner Burney has his hand up. I do want to.
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, I think Commissioner Goodrich has the point's well taken. And I think, I've heard many times people say that the MIH program has unforeseen consequences and that we may, in many cases, lose more affordable units than we create through the program, and that there are racial impacts that we're not really understanding. And I think one of the problems is we really don't have the data to, determine that either way. And I don't know what we can do about the overall impact of these changes and what the consequences are, both short-term and long-term. I think it's something that we really need to try to get a better handle on in terms of analyzing after these projects go through what the consequences are.
Well, has not the city council passed legislation around racial impact studies? I'm not sure how they will impact our findings or our process, but I know that is something that's in the offing.
Yes,
is it not?
It is, and I guess I would say stay tuned in that our team that is working on that will be, has been engaged with stakeholders on the reports that are required and the tool that is being built. And we will be, briefing the commission over the course of the winter and spring, and that those will, the reports themselves will be required for a certain sort of suite of applications starting in June, I believe. So,
okay.
All right. Further information on that.
And
I should just note to Commissioner Burney's comment that there have been mostly down zonings in the surrounding area. You've seen a number of smaller up zonings, but all the area-wide rezonings in Crown Heights or in Bedford-Stuyvesant have been mostly either balanced rezonings or reductions in density. Right, so the only MIH rezonings that we've seen are actually here in this area, and those projects are early on and have yet to go forward.
Winston, if you start talking about downzoning, you might trigger a whole other conversation, so be careful.
For sure.
That said, are there any other questions or observations on these items? When are they going to be voted, Ryan?
These will be voted on February 16th. So we have one more review session where we can have a little discussion about them. And we'll try to incorporate some of this discussion into the report as best we can.
Okay. Commissioner Goodrich, you have any other questions you wanted to render at this time before we move forward?
I don't know if this was mentioned in the prior presentation that was mentioned, but one of the other things that that was presented on at the hearing, someone said that there were in the same block 4 applications in the same year. Something to that effect. I don't know if this rings a bell for anyone, but I was interested in that as well.
There have been a few, Commissioner, there have been a few applications. There's only been one other on that block.
Okay.
Called
There have
840
been several on Atlantic Avenue, but not on one block.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think if we have an opportunity, Commissioner Goodrich, to perhaps if we meet with you, when we meet with you separately, we can walk you through the M Crown area that the other commissioners are very familiar with now, and we can give you that same familiarity to allow you to have a better understanding of why there are so many applications here and the history behind all of those applications and our work with the local community to address their concerns.
All right.
Okay.
So moving on to other post-hearing follow-ups, do let me know if there's questions on these, the Sutter Avenue rezoning. Okay, the West Village bid formation. Okay. The New Providence redevelopment. This is 225 East 45th Street. All right. The Sutphin Boulevard. This is the downtown Jamaica bid expansion. Okay. And last but not least, 9881 Queens Boulevard rezoning. Okay.
Don't see any questions.
There are no further questions on that. That concludes our review session agenda for today. The time is 2:55 p.m. Right.
All righty.
Thank
you,
guys.
colleagues.
Hey, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Let's see you Wednesday.
Bye-bye.